What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. Hope everybody is doing well on this Tuesday afternoon. I hope that you're having a way better day than what I'm having, because you won't believe what I woke up to in my DMs on X. I had a Texas Longhorns fan just going absolutely ballistic on me, talking about you're a dumbass. You don't know anything about football. Don't ever let me catch you in public. If I ever see you in public, I'm going to beat you up. Like, damn, like, you that upset over a prediction that was right? Listen, I get it. I'm not for everybody, but my thing is, it's just the opinion. You feel me? I don't hate your team. I don't have anything against the players. I'm just on here trying to make a living. I'm just on here giving my thoughts like everybody else is. So why is it that what did I say that was that outrageous that you just got to go ballistic on me like that in my mentions and then my DMs on X? That's why I don't really read my DMs like that anymore. You feel me? But that was just funny to me. It's just so crazy how wrapped up people are in terms of how they feel about their team. And I guess that's what makes football, or at least college football, so great, the passion that the fans have. But it's just wild to me that I woke up to that. You feel me? I don't have anything against your team. None of this is personal. You feel me? I'm just on here giving my opinion and my predictions, just like you have the ability to create your own platform and give your opinions. You feel me? So I was a little bit shocked to wake up to that in my DMs. I was like, bro, are you okay? Like, seriously, you're this upset over a prediction because I said that Georgia was going to dog Texas and Texas got dogged again by the dogs? I mean, holy cow, man. But we got a great show on deck. I'm going to be previewing the first round of the college football playoffs. I am so excited to watch these games, man, because I mean, listen, we got Indiana going on the road, the South Bend to take on the Fighting Irish. We got Clemson versus Texas, SMU versus Penn State. We got a lot to get into on this episode. Bill Belichick, it looks like he's coming a lot closer to getting that UNC job. And I've been listening to a lot of takes from people in the national media about how they feel Bill Belichick is going to do at the college level. And I strongly disagree with a lot of them. I think that Bill Belichick is far from being a washed coach. And the number one reason why he will crush that North Carolina, without giving away too much, because we're going to dive into it later, but if you are a high school recruit and you truly care about being developed and making it to the next level, then you wouldn't care too much about how much money you can get out of Bill Belichick in North Carolina. You would care more about the development, the fact that you get to learn from an 8-time Super Bowl winning coach, a guy who has coached two of the greatest players to ever play football, that being Tom Brady and Lawrence Taylor. I think that if you truly are trying to get developed and you're not chasing the bag, who wouldn't want to play for Bill Belichick? You feel me? Bill Belichick is one of the greatest football coaches of all time, and college football now has become a lot similar to the NFL than what it used to be a decade ago. I mean, I saw some news about how South Carolina pretty much gave Dylan Stewart an extension. They gave him like an NIL deal worth $1 million to $1.5 million. It's just crazy because we all wanted these players to get paid. But now they're getting contract extensions. At this point, just make them employees and make them sign contracts, because getting extensions as a college athlete is just absurd to me. With Georgia losing Carson Beck at quarterback, are their national championship hopes over? I don't think so. I don't see the difference between Gunner Stockton and Carson Beck, to be honest. I think that they both are on the same level. If anything, Gunner Stockton could possibly be better than what Carson Beck was. And I also want to rank every team that is in the playoffs this year, from the team that has the least chance to win it all to the team that has the best shot at winning it all. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching, YouTube, X, Facebook. Shout out to my guy, Ricky Sports Lover. He says, hello, what's going on, my guy? Hope you're doing well. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon if you're new so you don't miss when we drop new content and when we go live. Remember that you can find us wherever you get your podcast from. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, the JT Sports Podcast is available. The links are down in the description down below. Follow me on Instagram at JT Sports _ and on X at JT Sports __. I guess if you disagree with anything I have to say about your team, you can let your frustrations be known in the DMs. I guess I will read it, but it's not a guarantee that I'm going to respond. I might just laugh at it like how I did earlier today. I really can't believe a Texas fan really was just blowing up my DMs, just text me paragraphs on top of paragraphs, just going off on me. It's just, dude, it's just a prediction. It's just an opinion. Chill out. Holy. But shout out to everybody that's tuned in, man. Let's dive into it. The first playoff game that I want to talk about, Notre Dame is hosting Indiana. This is going to be the first playoff game that gets played. Start that over. Indiana versus Notre Dame. This is going to be the first playoff game that gets played of the 12-team CFP era. The Fighting Irish currently are an 8.5-point favorite. What makes this game interesting is that you have an Indiana team that really didn't look like one of the best 12 teams in college football, in my opinion. They played a weak schedule, and the only time they played good competition, they got dominated by Ohio State on the road. But this is Indiana's opportunity to prove that they belong. Because the same way a lot of folks feel about Indiana, they've been feeling the exact same way about Notre Dame. As a matter of fact, somebody told me that it's a disgrace to college football that Notre Dame is in the playoffs after losing to NIU. And let me just say this. Notre Dame is the most disrespected team that made it into the playoffs because everybody just wants to harp on no loss to NIU like there aren't other teams that had ugly losses to teams that they were expected to beat. And what gets overlooked about Notre Dame is how good this defense is. And Indiana offensively, I really believe that they're going to struggle against the size and the speed that Notre Dame's defense has. Notre Dame is third in the nation in passing yards per game allowed. They're third when it comes to forcing takeaways. And their secondary has insane length and athleticism. Every starter in their secondary is 6 foot, 185 pounds. They either weigh more or they're taller than that. So you got a lot of length back there. You look at a guy in true freshman, Leonard Moore, 6'2", 187 pounds. Safety, Xavier Watts, cornerback Benjamin Morrison are going to be drafted within the first couple of rounds of the 2025 NFL draft. They got a lot of depth on the interior of their defensive line. Riley Mills leads the team in sacks with 6.5. Howard Cross. And Indiana, the last time they played a defense remotely as good as what Notre Dame's is, they got held to 151 yards, 68 through the air, and a few on the ground. And after their first drive against Ohio State, which is when most of those yards came from, they really couldn't get anything going. And up front, Indiana has to be able to protect Curtis Ward because I doubt that they're going to have much success running the football against this Notre Dame defense with the size and the athleticism that they have. When you look at Notre Dame's defensive line compared to Indiana's offensive line, there is a night and day difference. And when I was listening to Urban Meyer, when he was describing what it was like looking at Indiana on the field versus Ohio State before the game, you know, he knew that it was going to be a one-sided affair because Notre Dame has more superior athletes than Indiana across the board, but Indiana is a well-coached team. They're disciplined. They play assignment sound football, and they don't beat themselves. And they also have the best run defense in college football. And Notre Dame, they're one of the best rushing teams in all of the nation. They are 11th in rushing yards per game. Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love. They've been one of the best quarterback running back duos in the nation. And if Indiana can slow down Notre Dame's run game, they can make them a one-dimensional team. That's how they have the opportunity to advance to the second round. But this is probably going to be a low-scoring game for the first 3 quarters. And the way I see this thing going is that it probably ends up being 13-10 heading into the fourth quarter. Notre Dame is up, and then Notre Dame starts to slowly wear down Indiana's defense, because the difference between Indiana and Notre Dame is that Notre Dame has more depth up front on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. Indiana, they do have a few good pass rushers on their defensive line, but they don't have enough bodies to keep guys fresh. And that's why Notre Dame is going to end up delivering a lot of body blows as this game wears on. And Indiana, as this game gradually wears on, they're going to get worn out and tired. And when you have a defense as good as what Notre Dame's is, with so much athleticism, guys are just flying around at 100 miles per hour, and you're a team that up front, you're undersized, you're going to have to rely on Curtis Wark to have a really efficient day for you. And he's been one of the more efficient quarterbacks in college football this year. 27 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, has one of the highest QBRs in the nation. But against Ohio State, he struggled. The offensive line pretty much only gave him a millisecond to throw the football, and he only had 68 passing yards. And despite how good Indiana has been, I still don't really know how good this team is based off the competition that they played. Now, I know that you can't defy a team by their schedule, but, I mean, when you look the way that you did against Ohio State, do you really belong here? We're about to find out. And Notre Dame's physicality offensively, when you think about their wide receivers, their tight ends, yeah, you don't really have nobody that really stands out, but you got a lot of size at that position. Indiana's best corner, D'Angelo Pons, is only 5'9". And I believe with Notre Dame being the bigger, the more physical team, is going to be a large reason why they end up winning this game. They say styles make fights. And in this game, I just feel stylistically we have a huge mismatch in these two teams. For Indiana, they're a team that more so is built to spread the football around. They like to beat you throwing the pigskin all over the field. But against Notre Dame, they are a team that they want to just run and pound you into oblivion. And that's how I see Notre Dame winning this game. Eventually, once we get into the fourth quarter, Indiana's going to be so tired, they're going to be so fatigued due to the lack of depth that they have up front, to where we start to see Notre Dame start to rally late in this game. And then that's when they start ripping off those big touchdown runs with Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard. So my score prediction in this game, I like Notre Dame 28-14 is going to be my final score prediction for this one. I do expect for Indiana to look much better in this game than what they did against Ohio State, because Notre Dame isn't as good as what the Buckeyes are, but they are better up front than what Ohio State is. And I do feel like their run defense is probably going to give up the most yards that they have all season. I know that they rank number 1 in run defense, but the numbers kind of lie a little bit when it comes to Indiana. The stats kind of deceive you, because statistically and analytically, Indiana is one of the best teams in college football. But how are you going to look when you're going up against some of the best teams in the nation? Because when I watch Notre Dame play this year, I legitimately see a top 12 team. Everybody that they've beaten since losing to NIU, they've done it pretty handily. They beaten up on the service academies. They beat Texas A&M early during this season. They beat Louisville. So it's not like Notre Dame hasn't been battle tested. If there's a team that has more to prove, it's Indiana in this game. because I really don't believe that they deserve the spot in the playoffs up until we had all of the chaos that happened with Bama and Ole Miss getting upset during the last couple of weeks. That's the only way they got into this thing, because if Ole Miss and Alabama went down and handled business, then Indiana's on the outside looking in. So to me personally, I don't really see an upset happening in this game. I like Notre Dame to win outright, and I like them to cover. The only way Indiana can win this game is if they can rotate enough guys in and out on the line of scrimmage defensively to where when they get to the fourth quarter, they don't end up getting body blowed and knocked out by Notre Dame's rushing attack. Because the thing that kind of makes Notre Dame hard to beat is that you know what they like to do. But you know that you're a dominant team up front when everybody knows you want to run the football, and yet you can still run it anyway. That's a sign that you're a physical football team. And Indiana, they're far from a physical football team, in my opinion. I think that they're a little bit more finesse, and that's why I just don't think stylistically this is a game that benefits Indiana. Shout out to my guy, Mike is him. He says, what's up? What's going on, my guy? Shout out to Chris Brady. He says, I got the Ducks plus 1,000 preseason futures. I threw a little on ASU 51-1 for a lotto ticket. I don't think that's too bad. I may add another team as well. Shout out to you, Chris Brady. Appreciate you for tuning in. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching, YouTube, X, Facebook. Hit that like button, subscribe, follow. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we drop new content. Let's keep it going. Tennessee travels on the road to Columbus to take on Ohio State. I thought that Tennessee was going to end up playing Ohio State at home. I was really shocked to see that Ohio State got this home game, and I wonder how fast of a start Ohio State is going to get out to in this game, because a popular talking point about this matchup has been if Ohio State starts slow out the gate, is their fan base going to turn on them? Because, you know, they just lost to Michigan, and losing to Michigan is a really deflating loss, because that game for Ohio State and Michigan is like their Super Bowl. And it's crazy how the narrative has flipped for both programs ever since that game, because before it got played, a lot of Michigan fans were not feeling that great about Sharon Moore and his future being a head coach of that program. And Ryan Day, you felt like Ohio State was destined to be in a national championship. But ever since that game happened, you know, the narrative has flipped. People feel much more optimistic about about Sharon Moore. And a lot of people feel like Ryan Day could be coaching for his job in these playoffs, which sounds insane to say, but this is a Tennessee team that really should terrify Ohio State, because their biggest weakness is their lack of consistency up front. They got injuries there. You're losing one of your best offensive linemen. Your center also is out as well. And Tennessee has one of the best defensive lines in college football. We all know about James Pierce Jr., but they got a really good secondary, really good linebackers, and they've been one of the 5 best defenses in the nation. But Ohio State also has a really good defensive line. Everybody knows about James Pierce Jr., but Jack Sawyer, JTT, Tyleik Williams, all 3 of those guys are starters on the D-line for Ohio State, and they are going to be high draft picks in next year's NFL draft. So much is made about how good Tennessee's defensive line is, but Ohio State's defensive line is just as good. But what's going to win and lose this game for both teams is going to be the quarterback play. Because to me, Nico Iamaleava, I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm not trying to offend any of you Tennessee fans, but let's just be honest about this dude. I don't think he's good enough to win this game, because he has struggled all year on the road against this year. Prior to playing against Vanderbilt, when he threw 4 touchdowns in that game, he only had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in all of Tennessee's road games combined this year. He didn't look that hot against Oklahoma. He threw no touchdowns against Arkansas when you lost that game, and when you lost on the road in Athens to Georgia. And I don't see you being able to beat Ohio State by just running the football all game long with Dylan Sampson. Now, Tennessee fans are going to say, well, JT, they lost to Michigan, and Michigan's quarterback sucks. You mean to tell me that you don't think that Nico Iamaleava is better than Davis Warren? Yes, Nico's better than Davis Warren, but you're not Michigan. The way that Michigan is built is not the same way that you're built. Michigan has a better offensive line than what you have. As a matter of fact, Ohio State's offensive line has been just as questionable as what your offensive line has been. I don't know why not a lot of people are talking about the troubles that Tennessee has had up front, but their offensive line is 78th in the nation in sacks per game allowed, or 74th, excuse me. The interior guard play that they've gotten out of their offensive line unit hasn't been that good. Tennessee's offensive line kind of has the same issues that Ohio State has. Everybody just wants to make it seem like Ohio State is coming into this game and their interior issues up front are going to get exposed when Ohio State's defensive line can expose the flaws that Tennessee has on their offensive line, which is why I can't see Dylan Sampson carrying Tennessee to a win in this game. I'm still expecting him to have a good game where he rushes for over 100 yards, maybe has a touchdown or two, but if you're going to beat Ohio State, Nico Iamaleava has to be able to have the best game of the season against this Buckeyes defense. Will Howard, he's already been battle tested. He had a pretty good game against Penn State. Is Will Howard an elite quarterback? No, but nobody's saying that. But with the talent that Will Howard has around him, with the Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, and Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson in the backfield, along with Chip Kelly calling the plays, he has enough around him that should be able to help elevate him. Remember, Georgia won back-to-back national titles with a walk-on quarterback. Some of y'all may have already forgot who he was, but Stetson Bennett. You feel me? So if Georgia can win with a guy like Stetson Bennett, then Ohio State is more than capable of being able to win a game like this with Will Howard at quarterback. The gap between Nico Iamaleava and Will Howard is not really wide at all. As a matter of fact, they both are on the same level if you ask me. If you were to ask me who would I rather have, Nico or Will Howard, I say, does it really matter? I don't really think neither one has really been all that great. They've been kind of like average to slightly above average at times, but Ohio State, from a personnel standpoint, they got more talent on the perimeter than what Tennessee has. Now, Tennessee has some really good receivers, but they don't have a guy that looks like he was built out of a football factory like Jeremiah Smith. This dude is a true freshman, only 18 years old, and yet he has the body build of a freaking running back. And I wonder if Tennessee has the corners that can match up well with Ohio State's wideouts, because Ohio State, this doesn't have to be a game that comes down to them being able to be more physical, being able to impose their will on the ground. Ohio State can win this game by airing it out on Tennessee's secondary. Now, of course, they may not have a lot of time to do that due to their offensive line inefficiencies and how good Tennessee's pass rush is, but that's Ohio State's style. I never felt like Ohio State has been a team that has been built to beat you on the ground. As a matter of fact, that kind of has been a little bit of their weakness. They've been at their best when they've been able to get the vertical passing game going. And they can get those big plays in the deep passing game to Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith. That's how Ohio State can win this game. If Tennessee's going to win this game, it's going to be off the shoulders of Dylan Sampson and Nico Iamaleava having to have a big game. And that's something that I just don't know Nico's going to be able to do, just with him being so young into his career. Going on the road in a playoff environment like this one is going to be unprecedented territory for a guy like Nico. And I think that you're asking a lot to tell him that, hey, we need you to throw for 3-4 touchdowns against a Jim Knowles coach defense. As good as how Tennessee's defense has been all year long, Ohio State's defense has been just as good. Now, Ohio State is a favorite in this game, and I do like them to cover, and I do like them to win outright, because just with Nico being so young, I just think that it's so hard to win in Columbus. I think that if he doesn't get out to a fast start early, then it's going to be tough sledding for Tennessee. Now, their defense is going to keep them around in this game. I'm not expecting this to be a blowout, but I do see Ohio State being able to generate more explosive plays than what Tennessee is going to be able to do. And that's something that has hindered Tennessee's offense, is that they haven't really gotten as many explosive passing plays as what you've been accustomed to seeing out of a Josh Heupel-led offense. Normally, when you think Tennessee, the last thing you think is them being a run-first team. For the last couple of years, we've always viewed Tennessee as a team that just likes to sling the football all over the field. They're throwing the football 40, 50 times a game. You know, when I think Tennessee, I still think of Hendon Hooker at quarterback. I still think of that 2022 Tennessee Vol squad. But they're a far cry from that. They're more physical, and they put more dependence on the run game than what I think they would like to, just because they haven't really been able to get the production that is needed out of a guy like Nico to win a game like this. And if Nico is ever going to be able to show up when it matters the most, it has to be in this game, because you're not going to be able to win this thing just asking Dylan Sampson to run it 30, 40 times. You are not Michigan. Michigan is Ohio State's biggest rival. They play them every single year. They know Ohio State better than what you do. I don't know when it's the last time you played Ohio State. And the last time you played a team that remotely resembles what Ohio State is, it was Georgia. And Georgia's offense had issues on the offensive line, and their quarterback play wasn't that great. And you lost that game. And you lost on the road to Arkansas. Tennessee has not been as good on the road this year as what they've been at home. When they play at home, they're unbeatable. But this game is being played in Columbus. And Ryan Day, you can say all you want to about him being overrated, not being that good as a head coach, but the only team that has had his number has been Michigan. Everybody else, he's able to beat. And this is a game where he has to come out here and prove himself and prove that, I actually have what it takes to win a national championship at Ohio State. I'm not just somebody that just inherited a program on third base and I've been coasting off the coattails of what Urban Meyer built. And I really believe that Ohio State and Ryan Day are going to come out and they're going to remind everybody that they are one of the best teams in college football, and they have just as good as a shot as anybody else to win it all. I see Tennessee losing this game 17-27 is going to be my final score prediction in this game. I see Tennessee being able to keep this a close game for most of the ball game, but the last closing minutes is when I think Ohio State starts to separate themselves. They have a better roster, and from a quarterback standpoint, I would trust Will Howard a little bit more than I trust Nico, only because of the experience factor. He's been a starter for multiple years. Nico Iamaleava, he's only started for 1 year, and that's why I think Nico has struggled on the road this year. It's a lot when you're asking a guy like Nico in an offense like this that you mostly consider to be an air raid offense when you're just throwing the football all over the field, and he hasn't really been able to be the quarterback that Tennessee needs to run this offense to its full potential. Because when Tennessee's offense is at its best, they're killing you with the deep shots downfield, and they're also able to kill you on the ground. But this year, they've been so one-dimensional is that if you take away the ground game from Tennessee and you force them to have to win by relying on Nico Iamaleava to do it with his arm, I don't know if he can be trusted with him being so young in a hostile environment like this. Ohio State, they can still win this game if the ground game isn't there, just because of the talent that is around Will Howard. Tennessee doesn't have a Jeremiah Smith or a Emeka Egbuka. They do have some really good receivers, but none of the receivers that they have are as good as what Ohio State has. And the supporting cast that is around Will Howard is good enough to carry him, along with that defense. And the supporting cast that Tennessee has, isn't as good as Ohio State's. So that's why I like the Buckeyes in this game. Penn State is going to be hosting their home playoff game against SMU, who is coming off their loss, I cannot talk today. Penn State is going to be playing host to their playoff matchup against SMU. SMU is coming off a devastating loss to Clemson in the ACC championship. They rallied from 17 down. They tied the game up just to blow it in the final 16 seconds with a big kickoff return and a game-winning field goal. And Penn State, to their credit, played really well against Oregon in the Big Ten title game. That was probably the best game that I've ever seen them play in the big game of that magnitude, with James Franklin and Drew Aller at the helm at quarterback. So in this game, I'm expecting for Penn State to roll. I don't really see this being a tightly contested game because, for one, Penn State's defensive line is going to cause a lot of headaches for SMU's offense, because in the first half of that ACC championship game, it looked like SMU didn't even belong on the same field as what Clemson was on, because it was just a big discrepancy in terms of their offensive line against Clemson's defensive line, and Clemson's defensive line was just overwhelming them. Now, as the game continued on, SMU started to get a little bit of rhythm offensively, and they started to get hot, and that's the kind of team that SMU is. You know, when they can get hot early, they can put up a lot of points, and they can do it in bunches. Rhett Lashlee, not only is he a fantastic head coach, but he's one of the better offensive minds in all of college football. He has really good schemes. He gets the most out of his players. But the thing with SMU is that they tend to beat themselves more times than not. They have games when they just have hella turnovers. You got guys dropping easy passes, similar to what we saw against Clemson in the ACC championship. I feel like the game that SMU played against Clemson, we saw the best and the worst of this team. When you're going up against a team like Penn State that's way better than Clemson, your margin for error is incredibly small. You're not going to be able to win this game by having like 2 and 3 turnovers. If anything, Kevin Jennings has to play completely flawless in a game like this, because Penn State, not only do they have an offense that can beat you a multitude of different ways, they can beat you on the ground with Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, but they also can carve you up through the air with that monster at tight end, number 44, Tyler Warren. And SMU defensively, their strength is them being able to defend the run. They have the 10th best run defense in all of college football. They're top 10 in rushing yards per game allowed. They also got a really good pass rush as well. They're 10th in sacks per game. But their weakness is their secondary. They're 94th in passing yards per game allowed. And this is a secondary that last week gave up 4 touchdowns to Cade Klubnik and company. So if you were struggling to slow down Clemson's passing attack, I can only imagine what Tyler Warren and Drew Aller are going to do to you. And Drew Aller, he's one of those quarterbacks that when he's playing his best football, he looks like the best quarterback in college football. But he does have times when, you know, he does have a couple of weird turnovers, a couple of weird interceptions that just make you scratch your head and say, you know, is Drew Aller actually good, or is this dude a little bit overhyped? But when you're going up against SMU defense that has just surrendered so many yards through the air, I see Drew Aller having one of those games where he probably throws around 3 to 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and we're probably going to see one of his better games of the year. For SMU, you really got to get that pass rush going. You have the ability to get after Drew Aller. You do have a few formidable pass rushers on your defensive line. The thing with SMU is that compared to the teams like Boise State and Arizona State and Indiana, the squads that most people feel wouldn't really be in here if Alabama or Ole Miss handled business, is that SMU actually does have a few NFL bodies on their defensive line. You know, number 5, one of their starting defensive tackles, he's pretty big. He moves pretty well. I think that SMU can give Penn State's offense a little bit of trouble in terms of them being able to run the football, because SMU does have a really good run defense. They are 8th in rushing yards per game allowed, and they held a really good Clemson running back in Phil Maffa to under 100 yards. And Clemson had a combined total of 64 rushing yards in that ACC title game. So SMU defensively, I don't worry about them up front. I more so worry about how good are they going to be on the back end. And the biggest weakness that Penn State has had this season is they don't really have a lot of elite players on the perimeter. They don't really have a lot of good receivers that are good at creating separation. But Harrison Wallace, it looks like he has started to become that go-to guy outside of the running backs and outside of Tyler Warren, because he had a really good game. He came on strong in the fourth quarter. And with the inconsistencies that SMU has had in that secondary this year, I don't really see the lack of elite perimeter talent really being that much cause for concern for Penn State. And honestly, SMU offensively, they got to be able to at least get the 27 points if they want to have a shot at winning this game, because I have no question that Penn State is going to at least put up 30 on this SMU defense. I question if SMU can keep up, because this isn't Clemson that you're playing. You're not going to be able to get down early in this game and find a way to make it a close game. If you get down against Penn State, it pretty much is all she wrote. So SMU offensively, what have they been good at this year when they've been playing their best? Well, they are really good at generating a lot of explosive plays. This is a fast offense. They got a lot of speed at running back and at wide receiver. They are 13th in America in yards per pass at 8.6. They're pretty efficient as well. They're 22nd and third down conversion percentage, and they average 8 points per game. And as good as what Penn State's defense is, because they do have a lot of monsters on that defense, like when you watch Penn State defensively, some of those guys that they have on that defensive line, like Abdul Carter, don't even look like they're freaking human. These look like guys who are mutants that you would see on an X-Men movie or something like that. But SMU, if they can play the same way they did up front the second half against Clemson in this game, then I can see them being able to put up 28, 30 points and being able to keep this a competitive game. But it's just hard for me to see that happening with how much talent Penn State just has all across the board defensively. They got a lot of good corners. They got good safeties. Their front seven is stout. SMU really has to play their best football. And the thing that gets SMU in trouble more times than not is they just beat themselves. Kevin Jennings is really good when he's on, really good dual threat quarterback, but he just has moments where he just can't take care of the football. And I know that, it's cliche to say that the team who takes care of the football has the best chance to win, but Penn State, they can still win this game even if they do have 2-3 turnovers. They're talented enough to be able to overcome that. SMU, on the other hand, they're not. So if SMU is going to win this thing, or if they're even going to be able to keep this close, they have to be able to take care of that football. And it's easier said than done when you're going up against a Penn State defense that is 12th against the pass and 11th against the run, and you're led by this freak in Abdul Carter. So I like Penn State to win. 42-10 is going to be my final score prediction in this game. I don't really expect this game to be close at all. I feel like by the time we get into midway through the second quarter, Penn State is probably going to be up at least by 2-3 touchdowns, because Clemson was just driving up and down the field with ease. And it was really shocking to see SMU just all of a sudden get back into the ball game. But Penn State, they just have so much on the line of scrimmage that it just makes it hard to see SMU being able to sustain too much offense, because, their defensive line is just full of freaks, full of uber athletic guys, and they were able to keep up with Oregon. And Oregon has pretty much the most talented team in college football this year. So if Penn State can keep up with Oregon, then I doubt that SMU is going to be able to hang around with Penn State. But this is college football. A lot of upsets have happened this year, and there is going to be at least one team this year in these first-round playoff matchups that ends up getting upset, but I don't see one of those being Penn State. Now, we got Clemson traveling to Austin to take on the Texas Longhorns. This is the first time that these two programs have ever played each other, and upsets have been happening all season long. And Dabo Swinney, he thrives when Clemson is an underdog. Last week, they were a 2.5-point underdog against SMU, and they won the ACC championship. And they're going into this game as an 11-point underdog against a Texas team that they have the talent to win it all, but are they going to get good enough quarterback play to live up to their potential? Because Quinn Ewers, the discussion around him is, should he be benched in favor of Arch Manning? Because you're going up against a Clemson team that, listen, they're in the playoffs. It doesn't matter who they lost to in the regular season, because Clemson is one of those squads that they've been here before and they know what it takes to win a game like this. They know how to win in a hostile environment. Now, they may not have played a playoff game in an environment like this. That's going to be new for them, but Clemson knows how to win in the playoffs. They have a lot of experience in these kinds of games. And Quinn Ewers, last time we saw him in the playoffs, he got out to a really slow start against Washington. Now, in the third and fourth quarter, he started to heat up, but in a game like this against a Clemson team that has everything that it takes to pull off an upset, with them taking care of the football, they're third in the nation in turnover margin, they're fifth in giveaways, they don't really turn it over, and they also are the best team in the nation at forcing takeaways. However, when you look at Quinn Ewers on the other hand, he's had a couple of moments this year, like against Georgia, when he's been turnover prone. And when you're going up against Clemson, the best way to get upset is by giving them extra possessions. If you give Clemson extra possessions, they are going to make you pay, because offensively, I think that Clemson is talented enough to be able to put points up on a really good Longhorns defense. My question is Quinn Ewers going to be the version that we saw against Michigan earlier this year when he was just completely flawless? He just handled business, because this is the first time where I've seen a Clemson team in the playoffs that their offense was better than their defense. Normally, their defense is loaded with a bunch of future NFL guys, and they got a couple of them on their front seven, but they're not as loaded on that side of the football as what they've been in years past. Normally, Clemson's defense is what they hang their hat on. They don't really have that this year. So if Quinn Ewers ends up having a few turnovers, like a few interceptions in the red zone, that could swing this game in Clemson's favor. Clemson, from a wide receiver standpoint, they don't have a lot of household names, but they do have a few younger players like Trevin Wesco, who has stepped up a lot. You know, they got a pretty good offensive line, and they got a really good running back in Phil Maffa, who was banged up a little bit going into that ACC championship game. And Cade Klubnik has played some of the best football of his career over these last couple of weeks. So for Clemson, you know, Dabo Swinney, he knows how to win a game like this. Steve Sarkisian, on the other hand, I really don't know. We've seen Steve Sarkisian come up short these last couple of years in the playoffs. You know, last year you lose to Washington. You get out to a slow start in that game. You lose in the SEC championship to a Georgia team that you were favored to beat, a Georgia team that you were more talented than, by the way. And I just don't feel like we've seen Texas play their best football relative to the talent that they have on that squad. Their defense has carried the load, but offensively, I still haven't seen it. And in spite of a Clemson team that hasn't really been that good defensively this year, I still don't really see Texas erupting for 30, 40 points. Even if Texas is able to survive an upset bid by Clemson, I still think that this is a game that they probably win 28-24, 28-21, because offensively, I just don't think they're that efficient with Quinn Ewers in. He also is really bad when he has pressure in his face. He doesn't really improvise. He's not really that mobile. So when a guy gets in his face, he can't evade pressure. And you got a really formidable Clemson pass rush. They are 28th in sacks per game. And when you can get pressure on Quinn Ewers, he gets rattled. He loses his composure. We saw it against Georgia. Anytime Georgia sent pressure up the middle, Quinn Ewers looks like he was seeing ghosts out there. So I think that Clemson definitely has everything necessary to pull off this upset. Now, I'm still going to take, I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna take Texas to win this game. Actually, give me Clemson to win it. You know, an upset is going to happen in the playoffs this year. And I believe that Clemson is going to be the team that ends up going into the second round with the upset win, because Texas, to me, they just haven't been that good. Defensively, they've been outstanding, and their defense is definitely going to keep them in this game. But offensively, I really can't get behind Quinn Ewers. You really can't sell me on Quinn Ewers. I think that Quinn Ewers probably is going to be the main reason that Texas loses this game, because he just isn't consistent. And he's been the most overhyped quarterback in college football history, because he was the 5th highest rated quarterback recruit of all time, according to 24/7 Sports, and he hasn't lived up to that hype. When you have somebody that has so much conversation around him coming out of high school, you know, foregoing his final year in high school, going to Ohio State, getting the bag, transferring to Texas, you expect the OP quarterback. And I don't really see an OP quarterback in Quinn Ewers. I see a guy that when everything's going right, he plays good football. Against Michigan earlier during the season, everything went right for Texas in that game. But ever since then, you know, it's been tough sledding for Quinn Ewers in this offense. And personally, I wouldn't be opposed to them benching him in favor of Arch Manning. I think with Arch Manning's mobility, he brings a different element to Texas offense that will make it more difficult for Clemson to defend. Clemson, they can get after your quarterback. And anytime Quinn Ewers is under duress, that's when he tends to play his best football. He doesn't play good football when he's under pressure, which is why Texas' 2 losses this year all came to who? Georgia. Against Texas A&M, he struggled. You know, I haven't seen Quinn Ewers play a great game in the last 2-3 months of this season. If Texas is going to win this game, Quinn Ewers has to play his best game, and I don't see it happening. Give me Clemson with the 28-24 upset over Texas. I know that Texas defense has been good all year long, but a team like Clemson that isn't really heavily penalized, they take care of the football, they don't beat themselves. You give them a few turnovers, and that could be what swings the game in their favors. I trust Cade Klubnik more than I trust Quinn Ewers. And that may sound like an outrageous statement to hear, but can you really blame me? Do you really trust Quinn Ewers in this game if you're a Longhorns fan? Because I don't see how you can. If you win this game, you're saying that we have to win in spite of Quinn Ewers, and I don't believe that that's a winning recipe for winning in a stage like this against a Clemson team that has been here before, with a head coach that has a ton of experience when it comes to winning these playoff games. So give me Clemson to cover that 11-point spread and to win outright. The last playoff game that we have to break down. Did we break down all the playoff games? Let me see. We did Indiana, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Tennessee, Penn State, SMU. Oh, okay. So we did break down all the playoff games. I thought we had one more to go. That's crazy. We only have 4. It seemed like we had like 6 first-round games, but I forgot. Arizona State and Boise State got bye weeks. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to my guy, Ricky Sports Lover. He says college football playoffs is going to be crazy. Ohio State is going to win that football game. I agree. I believe that Ohio State will beat Tennessee. I think that's probably going to be one of the more intriguing matchups, just because of all of the talk around Ryan Day, surrounding his job security, and with how good Tennessee has been defensively. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is, look, even though Carson Beck is injured and his status for the second round playoff matchup is questionable with that elbow injury, I don't believe that losing him hurts Georgia's chances in terms of being able to win it all this year. The drop-off between Carson Beck and Gunner Stockton, there is none. If anything, going from Carson Beck to Gunner Stockton could be an upgrade for Kirby Smart in this Georgia offense, because what Gunner Stockton brings to Georgia's offense is elite mobility. You can call design quarterback runs with Gunner Stockton. You can do zone reads, quarterback power with him. And with the struggles that Georgia has had on the ground this year, coupled with their wide receivers dropping passes left and right, you need a guy like Gunner Stockton that can bring an added dimension to your offense, that can kind of ease the burden off of your passing attack. Because with how deep you are at running back, you got Etienne, you also got the freshman running back as well. You have enough where you could beat whoever you have to play in the second round solely really just running the football. Because if you got to play Indiana or Notre Dame in the second round, you don't need great quarterback play to beat either one of those teams, because defensively, you are still performing at the elite level. And what isn't being talked about enough about this Georgia team is how good their defense has played. Outside of that Georgia Tech game, this defense has been outstanding. Their pass rush has been good. Their secondary has been really good as well. And it's really hard to move the football on this Georgia defense. And it's even harder to score points on Georgia's defense when they get into the red zone. Their red zone defense has been phenomenal this season. So your path to the national championship, even if you did have Carson Beck playing, still was going to be relatively easy, because once you get out of round two, after you play Indiana or Notre Dame, the matchup that you possibly are going to have in the semifinals is going to be you against Boise State and Ashton Genty. You should win that game. Or you play SMU. You definitely will win that game. Or you play Penn State. Now, the chances of you being able to beat Penn State with Gunner Stockton compared to a guy like Carson Beck, I think is around 70-30. I still would like you over Penn State because of how good your defense is. And Drew Aller, anytime he goes up against a remotely good defense, he tends to struggle. And that could be a game that favors you, because it probably is going to be low scoring and kind of the same issues you have offensively, not really having good play out of your wide receivers. Penn State has the same issues, other than they have a freaking Tyler Warren who they can just spam the football to. But I could see Georgia making it out of round two, because you got an easy matchup against the winner of Notre Dame, Indiana. And then even if you do have to play Penn State in the semifinals, I still like you to win that game. So then it comes down to, who are you going to play in the Natty? Is it going to be Oregon, Ohio State, or Texas? Well, with Gunner Stockton, I like you to beat Texas again. You could easily beat Texas for the third straight time in a row this year, because of you just having Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian's number. Ohio State, they're not that good up front. You could get over on Ryan Day. I think that if there is a team that Kirby Smart, if he had to pick who he could avoid playing in the national championship potentially, it would be Oregon, because Oregon is not only the best team in college football, but they've also been the most consistent. With how good Dylan Gabriel has been, with how efficient that passing attack and that entire offense has operated, if Oregon gets the 28 points against you, it's game over, because Georgia's offense has struggled to score points this year. They've won the most of their games being low-scoring affairs, but anytime, like what you saw against Ole Miss, you can get to the high 20s on them, that's when they get in trouble. And that's when I believe that when you're going up against a team that has elite quarterback play, like what Oregon has gotten out of Dylan Gabriel, that's when Georgia's going to have a tough time winning with Gunner Stockton. But even then, Dan Lanning is a Kirby Smart disciple. He was an assistant on his staff for a couple of years. So Kirby Smart is pretty familiar with Dan Lanning. And I still think that Georgia will have a shot at being able to win that game. Even with Gunner Stockton at quarterback, Kirby Smart, with how good of a coach he is, he's going to find a way to game plan around what he has, and he's going to find a way to get the best out of him. Gunner Stockton was highly touted when he was coming out of high school. The dude was a 4-star recruit. He was a top 200, top 150 player coming out of high school. So obviously the potential is there. He's waited in the wings behind Carson Beck. And when Carson Beck graduates, you know, he was most likely going to be the dude next up anyway. So this is a chance for Georgia fans to get a glimpse of what's going to be their future at quarterback once Carson Beck leaves, because they are dabbling with a few quarterbacks in the transfer portal. Like I saw a rumor that said that they were in on getting Jackson Arnold. I think that Gunner Stockton is good enough to lead this Georgia team to a national championship. You know, the offensive line is more healthier now than what they were during the middle portion of the season when they were banged up. And coming off a bye, you're going to be fresh, you're going to be rejuvenated, and you're going to have about a week or two to think about how you're going to change your scheme to best benefit the talent that Gunner Stockton has with his mobility. And he looked pretty good throwing the football against Texas. Although he did have that interception, it wasn't that he tried to force the ball into a tight window and he got tricked by the coverage that Texas was running. He just tried to do too much. He was just trying to make a play happen when he should have just threw the ball out of bounds and tried to live for the next down. Gunner Stockton, listen, most of us don't know too much about this dude. Most of you guys are just figuring out who the hell he is, but Kirby Smart does a really good job recruiting. And I'm pretty confident that whoever Georgia plays, unless you got to play Oregon in the national championship, you got a good chance at beating them because you're not going up against any high-powered offense. Like if you were going up against a team like Miami or somebody that you just know can put 30 points on you in their sleep, I would be concerned. But with all of the potential matchups that you have, even if you play Ohio State, it's going to be a 21-24 game or 17-20 game. If it's a 31-34 kind of game where you got to get into the high 20s, the high 30s to win it, those are the games that don't favor Georgia. If Georgia has to get into a shootout and they got to go point for point, that's not a game that favors them. But most of the upcoming matchups that we could see them in are against teams that don't really have super potent offenses, which is why I believe Georgia isn't going to have a drop-off with Gunner Stockton at quarterback. And what about if Gunner Stockton ends up being like the next Cardale Jones? You feel me? He's a backup. He comes in and he just crushes it and he ends up outplaying Carson Beck. Then we should be talking about Georgia winning another national championship, in my opinion, if that happens. Shout out to Kate Roan with the $5 donation. Greatly appreciate you as always. She says Texas should absolutely start Manning. My Longhorn fam is over it with viewers, and rightfully so. Appreciate you greatly. Powerful JT Sports. Hey, I appreciate you, Kate Roan. Yeah, I agree, man. Like, I don't see Texas beating Clemson with Quinn Ewers at quarterback. I just think that he's just too erratic. He's just too streaky of a quarterback to trust against a Clemson team that's really good at forcing turnovers, and they don't turn the football over themselves. They have the perfect recipe to cooking up an upset against the Longhorns. I want to rank every college football playoff team's chances of winning the national championship, starting from least to best. First, I got Indiana at 12. I don't think they got a chance in hell at winning the national title this year because they aren't really that good up front on the lines of scrimmage. And they kind of are like a JV team, in my opinion. They're only here because of default. Because Alabama, Ole Miss lost, you kind of had no choice but to put Indiana in the playoffs. Now, they are a well-coached team, but the last time we saw Indiana against an elite team, that being Ohio State, they got ran off the field. They didn't even look like they deserved to be in the playoffs with how they played against Ohio State. So I think out of all of the 12 teams that are in the CFP this year, they have the lowest chance or the least chance to hoist that national title trophy. Next, I got Boise State. They come in at 11 for me. Boise State, I don't even know how they got a first-round bye. I get that they were the highest-rated conference champion, but they're a G5 school. And I'm not trying to say that a G5 school could never compete for a national championship, but this isn't even the best G5 school to get into the playoffs. 2020 Cincinnati clears this 2024 Boise State team. Boise State has one of the best running backs in college football history in Ashton Jeanty. But other than that, you know, up front, they're not really that great. They got size, but they don't really have guys with size that can move like what Georgia and Oregon have. And with them having that first round bye, they saved themselves from getting an early playoff exit. I don't see them having the shot being able to win the national championship. Next, I got Arizona State. Now, Arizona State, they were expected to finish in last place in the Big 12 this year. So for them to end up winning the Big 12 title in year 2 under Kenny Dillingham is a huge accomplishment. They got Cam Scottaboo. They're a well-coached team. They got a pretty good quarterback in Sam Levitt who doesn't turn the football over. He's really efficient, pretty good with his legs as well. But when they end up having to play against any of the top-notch teams in this thing, like a Texas, a Penn State, or Oregon, Ohio State, or Georgia, they're going to get smoked. And like Boise State, they were fortunate enough that they got that bye from winning their conference title, because if they had to play anybody in the first round, they will be walking home with their early playoff exit. SMU, they come in at number 9 for me. Now, SMU is better than Arizona State, in my opinion, because they have more size and more NFL bodies on the line of scrimmage than what the 3 teams ranked behind them do. And SMU, we saw what they did in the second half against Clemson. When they can play their best football and they don't shoot themselves in the foot with random turnovers from Kevin Jennings, they can put up points against anybody in this thing. Okay, we saw them put 30 on Clemson. They could put 30 on Penn State. They could put 30 on Notre Dame. They could put 30 on the Georgia possibly, because they do have a pretty good enough offensive line that as long as they don't have the turnover bug, and with how well coached they are by Rhett Lashley, has really good schemes, a really good X's and O's guy, I can see SMU possibly having a shot that maybe they could have a Cinderella run and they make it to the Final Four. Out of all of the quote-quote Cinderella teams that we have in the CFP this year, SMU to me looks like they have the best shot at being able to win the national championship. I have Clemson at 8. Now, Clemson, they got a head coach that has been here before. Dabo Swinney has a lot of experience in the playoffs, so you got to give them a little bit of brownie points for that. You got an experienced team. It's not like you're starting a freshman quarterback. Cade Klubnik, he started for the last couple of years, and this has been his best season. He has one of the best touchdown-interception ratios in the country. And Clemson is a team that doesn't beat themselves. They have a really good turnover margin. They also are really good at forcing takeaways as well. They're the number 1 team and coming away with forced turnovers, whether it be fumbles, interceptions. They're pretty good up front. Not great, but good enough where they got an offensive line that is dependable. You got a pass rush that can get after the quarterback from time to time. Clemson, once they beat Texas in the first round, like how I expect them to, I think the floodgates are open in terms of how far they potentially could go, because they could beat a Penn State. I don't think the gap between Penn State and Clemson is that wide to where Clemson doesn't have a shot. And I don't really consider them a Cinderella team like a SMU, or Arizona State, or a Boise State, only because they do have the kind of talent needed to compete with any of the best teams that are ranked above them. They could play Ohio State and give them a competitive game. They could play Georgia again, and I think with them playing Georgia for a second time, that game would be a lot closer than what the first one was the first go-around. Number 7, I got Tennessee. Tennessee is a fascinating team because if their quarterback played a little bit better, they probably could win it all with how good their defense is. They probably got the best defense out of any team that's in the playoffs this year, with them having James Pierce Jr., who's going to be a first rounder in next year's draft. You got a pretty good secondary, and offensively, you got a lot of good pieces around Nico Iamaleava. Dylan Sampson, though, he's carried that Tennessee team. But if Nico can play his best football in the playoffs, then Tennessee, they could have a shot at making a run and hoisting that national title trophy. But the reason why I got them at 7 is due to the inconsistencies that Nico Iamaleava has had anytime Tennessee has gone up against a relatively quality opponent. They struggled against Georgia in that loss. They got upset against Arkansas. They weren't really that good against Florida, although they won that game. You know, if Nico could just play above average football, I could see Tennessee being in the Final Four, possibly the national championship game. Next up, I have Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame, what makes them a better team than the teams that I have ranked behind them is that, for one, They have a quarterback in Riley Leonard that is one of the best runners in all of college football. He may not be that good throwing the football, but he's really good when he decides to tuck and run. He's really powerful, has pretty good vision. He knows how to bounce off guys and get extra yardage after contact. So I think that Notre Dame, with how efficient and how dominant they've been on the ground this year, coupled with them having a really good defense, this is the best defense that I can remember a Notre Dame team having in all my years watching college football, because they got a lot of size, but they also got a lot of athleticism as well, especially when you look at the back end of their secondary. They got a lot of long, super athletic guys. Every single corner and safety that starts for Notre Dame is no shorter than 6 foot and weighs no less than 185 pounds. So you got good size and length that makes it incredibly hard to move the ball on this Notre Dame defense. Now, going into my top 5, I got Texas starting off, because Texas, if they could get good quarterback play out of Quinn Ewers, I have no question that not only are they going to make it to the Final Four, but they also could end up winning the national championship. They got a really good defense, and, you know, offensively, with guys like Isaiah Bond and with how good their offensive line is, they got everything necessary to win a national championship. It's just that the quarterback play just isn't there. Now, if they go from Quinn Ewers to Arch Manning, then I most definitely feel they should be moved up a bit. I could see them being third or second if they were to start Arch Manning, but with Quinn Ewers in, he kind of just holds back Texas' potential. But they are better than Notre Dame, Arizona State, Boise State. But listen, I just can't get behind Quinn Ewers at quarterback. And I think that he's the main reason why Texas ends up being an early round exit out of the CFP this year. Penn State comes in at number 4. Penn State quietly is not being talked about a lot in terms of being able to win a national championship, because they got the easiest path out of all the teams in this thing, with them having to play a first round game at home against SMU. And then you potentially end up having to play Boise State after that. I think that there's a pretty favorable path for Penn State to get to the national title game. Offensively, yeah, you don't have a lot of elite receivers, but you do got Tyler Warren, who's one of the best players in college football. Drew Aller, when he's on, he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And you have a fantastic defense led by Abdul Carter, who's going to be a top 5 pick in next year's draft. So Penn State, don't sleep on the Nittany Lions this year. This is definitely a team that is more than capable of being able to get into the national championship game. I know that James Franklin has that fraud label on him, and he definitely deserves that. I call him Little Game James Franklin for a reason, but you know, with some of the potential matchups that Penn State could have, I think they favor them. And I think they're more talented than anybody else that they're going to see until they get to the Final Four. They gave Oregon a pretty competitive game, so they come in at 4 ahead of Texas. At 3, I got Georgia. Now, some of y'all are probably going to push back on this. You're probably going to say, hey, JT, how do you think that Georgia has a better chance to win than Penn State and Texas, considering their quarterback issue? They got Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is still the best coach in college football. When you got an elite coach, it doesn't really matter who you have at quarterback, because he's just going to find a way to win. Georgia's defense has been outstanding all season long. Yeah, they had a bugaboo against Georgia Tech, but outside of that, this defense has low-key carried this Georgia team to the point that they're in right now. And regardless, even if Carson Beck was healthy, I still would have felt like, making a quarterback change would have been the best thing, because it's not like Carson Beck was playing good football. So no matter what, you still were going to have concerns about the quarterback position regardless. And Gunner Stockton, I believe that he gives Georgia somewhat of an upgrade compared to Carson Beck, just because he's more mobile, more athletic. He can move, extend plays. Carson Beck, he could run a little bit, but not to the degree that Gunner Stockton can when you feel comfortable running quarterback power with him. So if Gunner Stockton ends up being like Cardale Jones 2.0, I don't see how we don't see Georgia playing in the national championship this year. At number 2, I got Ohio State. Listen, I'm not writing off Ohio State. Ohio State was my preseason pick to win a national championship this year, and I'm still not getting off that. Look, I get it that they have injuries up front, but Georgia hasn't been that good up front. Texas has had their fair share of struggles on the line of scrimmage, and so has pretty much the majority of other teams in the playoffs. The only teams that really have elite offensive lines that are in the CFP this season are Notre Dame, Oregon, and Penn State. That's about it. But Ohio State, with how good they are defensively and the talent that they have on the perimeter, they can kind of overcome a little bit of their offensive line limitations. And listen, Will Howard, if Stetson Bennett can win a national championship, then so can Will Howard. You don't have to have an all-time great quarterback to be able to win a national championship as long as you have a great team around them, which Ohio State does with Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson in the backfield. You know, Ohio State, to me, they still have just as good as a chance as anybody else to win a national championship. That's why I think they have the second best possibility of winning it all this season. And lastly, I'm going with Oregon. Oregon is my pick to win the national championship this year. Like most people, Oregon just is a complete team on all three phases: special teams, defense, offense. They've been the only elite team that we've had in college football this year. Yeah, they've had a fair share of close games. Like, they came close to losing to Boise State, Idaho early during the season. They had a scare near the last few weeks of the season on the road in Madison to Wisconsin. But for the most part, Oregon pretty much is the only team that you can look at in the playoffs this year and be like, yeah, I know that team is going to be playing in a national championship game. And at this point, we're asking the question, who is Oregon going to be playing? Not if they're going to make it to that point, because even if they do have to play Tennessee and Ohio State coming off their bye, I still like them to win that game. You know, that Ohio State-Oregon rematch possibly could be the national championship pretty much. But these are all of the 12 playoff teams ranked in order by who has the least chance to win a national championship and who has the best chance to win a national championship. Leave your thoughts on these rankings down in the comment section down below. Who's too low and who's too high? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Now, before we get up on out of here, I got one more thing. Well, I got a few more things that I want to talk about. Bill Belichick, it looks like Bill Belichick is coming really close to getting that North Carolina head coaching job. I've been listening to a lot of media heads talk about Bill Belichick and how good he'll be coaching at the collegiate level. And I'm surprised at how many people are just absolutely wrong about Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is not a washed head coach, and he knows how to relate with younger people. His girlfriend is only, 24, 23 years old? If he can relate to her, he can definitely relate to a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds. And with how college football is structured now, where it's not really about building relationships with players per se, it's more so about just giving them the bag, developing them, and putting them in the right situation to succeed. College football has been more closer to the NFL than what it ever has been in today's new age of the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness. Therefore, Bill Belichick pretty much isn't really going to have that much to learn in comparison to how he ran the New England Patriots for all those years compared to how he's going to run North Carolina. And he already has talked about on the Pat McAfee show about how, the selling point with playing for him at North Carolina is, I can develop you for the NFL. If you truly care about making it to that level and you're not really chasing the bag, I can help you mold into an NFL caliber player. I developed Lawrence Taylor, the greatest defensive player that ever played football. I drafted and helped develop the greatest quarterback in NFL history, Tom Brady. I've won 8 Super Bowls. I know what it takes to be a champion. I know what it takes to turn you into a potential NFL draft pick. And if you're a high school recruit It's not like you don't know who Bill Belichick is. Contrary to popular belief, a lot of these high school players, they watch the NFL. They remember watching Tom Brady and the Patriots winning all those Super Bowls during the peak of their dynasty. It's not like these guys are dinosaurs and they live underneath a rock. I've seen a few people say that these college players, these college recruits that Belichick's going to go after, they probably don't even know who he is. Like, you got to be kidding yourself. Bill Belichick is the greatest head coach in NFL history. All these recruits know who Bill Belichick is, and they're going to give him a listen. If Deion Sanders is getting guys out of the portal and getting guys out of high school without having to make any in-home visits, then Bill Belichick can do the same. And Bill Belichick knows that if he's going to succeed here, he's going to have to recruit. He's not a novice to the basic functions of building a good team in college football. He knows that you got to mix the portal in with a little bit of recruiting, and he is more than prepared to have a staff of guys who are going to be able to go into the living rooms of these recruits and be able to sway guys into playing for him. Because the biggest selling point for playing for Bill Belichick at North Carolina is the fact that he knows how to develop you and get you ready for the NFL. And it's not really about can you get along with the younger players. Listen, if you can't handle being coached by Bill Belichick, then you're not cut out to be in the NFL. You know, like, if you can't take hard coaching from the greatest head coach in NFL history, an 8-time Super Bowl champion, then you just don't deserve to be an NFL player. Because if you can't handle the coaching from Bill Belichick that you're going to get, then you're not going to be able to handle the coaching from anybody else in the NFL. It would be a red flag if I was a scout for any player that couldn't take Bill Belichick's coaching. And Bill Belichick, it's not like the dude is just a complete a-hole. Even Julian Edelman said it. Like, he's not as uptight as what a lot of people in the media think. He knows how to relate with people. You know, Bill Belichick, if anything, some of the best players that he ever drafted were guys that had a lot of red flags character-wise. Rodney Harrison gave a lot of respect to Bill Belichick for how his career went. You know, like, Bill Belichick, if you're trying to get to the next level, if I'm a high school recruit, I immediately would say, hey, sign me up. I would love to get coached by Bill Belichick. And another thing is, you know, he instantly would become the best head coach in college football in terms of X's and O's standpoint. When it comes to a strategic standpoint, playing in the ACC, one of the weakest conferences in college football, I could see him coaching circles around Dabo Swinney, Mario Cristobal. The ACC is not the SEC. If this was the SEC or the Big Ten that Bill Belichick was getting a head coaching job in, then I would feel differently. But he's in the ACC. Most of these coaches that are in the ACC are not really that good. And Bill Belichick knows how to find and develop good offensive and defensive linemen. And if you can win up front, then you can beat anybody. And also, Bill Belichick, with all of the years of experience that he has just coaching football, you know, he just has so much to offer these younger players that nobody ever really talks about in the national media. You know, everybody just keeps and make it seem like Bill Belichick is some kind of recluse. He's some kind of Grinch. He just has no charisma, no personality at all, when that couldn't be further from the truth. You don't bag a 24-year-old girlfriend being 70-something years old with a 40-something year age gap if you don't have some kind of charisma. Like, Bill Belichick knows how to get the most out of his players. You know, like, there's been plenty of Super Bowls that the Patriots have won when Bill Belichick has gotten guys riled up. He's gotten guys motivated. If you actually watch some of the behind-the-scenes documentaries about those Patriots teams, you will see that Bill Belichick is a pretty good motivator. He's a really good leader of men because he holds everybody accountable. And I really don't get this narrative that Bill Belichick going to college football is a sign that he can't get an NFL job. Maybe the reasoning for him taking a college job and not an NFL job is that he has full control of a program, and two, it's much easier to turn a team into a contender faster in college football than what it is in the NFL. There's not a lot of head coaching opportunities that are going to be opening up that give Bill Belichick the best chance to win right out the way. The Philadelphia Eagles look like they're going to be on their way to being in a conference championship game potentially. It doesn't look like they're going to fire Nick Sirianni with the success that they're hiring. And the Dallas Cowboys, listen, why would Bill Belichick want to coach under Jerry Jones, one of the most power-hungry owners in the league? Bill Belichick rather run the program, have his say-so, have his hands over how everything is ran and operated, than have to answer to somebody in the NFL. It's not that he can't get another head coaching job. I'm pretty sure the Jaguars would give Bill Belichick a head coaching job right out the gate if he was interested in it. You know, coaching in college football, although it kind of is a little bit of uncharted territory for Bill Belichick, his dad coached college football for a very long time. So it's not like Bill Belichick doesn't have a little bit of knowledge of how to be successful at this level. And he definitely knows how to coach and develop players. Everybody that has ever played under Bill Belichick has always praised how good he's been as a head coach because he pays attention to the details. You know, Antonio Brown, out of all people, said that Bill Belichick was one of the greatest coaches, the greatest coach that he ever played under in terms of having a good understanding of the game of football, to the point where he knows who's going to be the officiating crew. He dictates how his practices are going to be ran based off, you know, is that an officiating crew that calls a lot of holding penalties? If it is, then he's going to have his offensive linemen practicing, doing drills that involves them, you know, not being able to hold. If you have an officiating crew that calls a lot of pass interference penalties, he's going to put mitts on his DBs and he's going to force them to practice not being able to grab on or really use their hands too much. Bill Belichick is just a great strategist, you know, and if he gets this North Carolina head coaching job, I don't see how you couldn't call him the best head coach in college football. He may not have the resume, or he may not have been able to have proven that he's a good head coach in college football, but if you're winning 8 Super Bowls in the NFL, I don't see how you couldn't have that same level of success in college football, because at the end of the day, yeah, the structures and the foundations are a little bit different when you compare coaching an NFL team to a college team, but at the end of the day, being a winner still requires you to have those same habits. Look at Jim Harbaugh. He won a national championship at Michigan. He took the 49ers to several conference championships and a Super Bowl. Jimmy Johnson was able to have success in the NFL and have success collegiately. If you're a good coach, you know how to win at any level, whether it be high school, middle school, Pop Warner, wherever. Good coaching just doesn't go away just because you go from the NFL to college football. And I don't think that Bill Belichick taking the North Carolina job is a downgrade. If anything, I think he views it as another challenge. He probably wants to have the right to say that I am, without a doubt, the greatest football coach in history. I won 8 Super Bowls in the NFL, and now I'm trying to win a national championship at a collegiate level. You don't really need to be building great relationships with guys when you're paying guys money. Who really cares about the relationship? If I'm giving you a big NIL deal, who gives a damn if I got a good relationship or not? I'm paying for you to do a job, and it's my job to put you in position to do it well, and that's what Bill Belichick is going to do. And he also wants to develop successful men off the football field. He has reiterated that several times. You know, he wants guys to be successful outside of football. If you are a high school recruit and your main objective, like how most of these guys say, is to get to the National Football League, there's not a better head coach who could prepare you for that than Bill Belichick. And if you say otherwise, then you're just lying. A lot of these recruits like to make it seem like they care about being developed when they just go to the school who's able to offer them the biggest bag. If Bill Belichick comes knocking on your door and says, hey, come play for me, you would be stupid not to take the opportunity, because he knows what it takes to get you ready for that level, because he's coached there for so many years. Shout out to everybody that tuned in. I appreciate you guys. Shout out to my guy, Eric Richardson. He says Oregon has to play Ohio State, so somebody's walking, somebody going home. I think Texas is going to be the team getting upset. Shout out to Kate Roan. She says, I believe you, and I still can't wrap my head around BB coaching college ball. That NIL has really changed everything. It really has. Shout out to Thomas. He says, keep up the good work, bro. I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that tuned in to this episode of JT Sports Live. Before you get up on out of here, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. Make sure that you hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we drop new content. Also, follow if you're listening on Facebook or X. Check us out, all podcasting platforms. We're not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I'll see